So thanks to everyone who sent in a mystery plant. We got a dozen photos. Some plants were identified, some were maybe identified, and some are still a complete mystery. I sought help. Thank you to Mindy, Donna Bingaman, Donna Kozak, Katrina Stevenson, and Kirsten for weighing in on some of the plants. Everyone used a variety of methods to ID and confirm plant identifications. After we talk about, well, while we talk about the plants, and afterwards I'll go through some of the tools that were used. And I just want to say this isn't a structured class. I'm self-taught, and I definitely don't know everything, but hopefully this discussion will provide everyone with ideas about the methods, pitfalls, and what they need to learn to be better at identifying plants. So just to start out with, I'll tell you that it's easiest to identify things that are in bloom. It seems like most of the resources and tools are set up to identify flowers as opposed to other parts of the plant. Sometimes having the seeds set is another good way. The mature plant, young plant, and the seedlings are the hardest to identify because many of them look the same and many of them look different from, like their leaves look different from what the mature plant leaves look like. It's also difficult IDing from photos because sometimes unseen details can provide crucial clues. Sometimes the roots, the smell, the feel of the leaves, the scale of the plant, in other words, how big or small it is. Seasonal variations, like if they're evergreen or deciduous, structures, growing habits, and surroundings are also good clues. And you can't see a lot of that from a photo. So the first one was sent in by Pam Shrimster. I know I mispronounced that. Does anyone have any idea? Because we had a lot of ideas and nothing that I looked at that I said, yeah, that's definitely it. So it was suggested that it may be an Artemisia, which is in the Aster family.
There, I'm getting ready to leave there.
Probably the most popular guess was dog fennel, but if you look at the dog fennel, it doesn't really look the same. It's much more feathery type of foliage.
Oh, got it. Yeah. As of yesterday, I guess the guy who's kind of like, I don't know, the org.
Okay. Who's talking?
Club president, but he said there was already.
Ellen, can you mute yourself?
Another, I think it was iNaturalist suggested it was Salva Sensalis, which is not native.
Mm-hmm.
That looks a little bit like it, but it has a little bit of a flower.
At the world, yeah.
Yeah, and you can't see, this looks like a fairly young plant, so maybe it will bloom or flower. And someone else suggested, or another app suggested, it was this small flower fumort. But again, I don't think the plant looks exactly like that. So this is a mystery. So Pam, if you still have the plant around, keep an eye on it. Maybe you can send us updated photos and we'll have a better luck at identifying it. Second plant was also sent in by Pam. It looks similar to the first one, but it's definitely not the same. You can see the leaves are quite different. So this one we did identify. It is drug fumitory or earth smoke. It's not a native. And it has, as you can see in this picture, it has little pink flowers with dark tips, blooms from early spring to late fall. And as near as I can tell, there's no wildlife value. So this seems like a good candidate to get rid of. Another Pam submission. And this one, everyone and all the apps pretty much agreed it was a Cud Weed. What I did was I looked at the Florida Plant Atlas. There's 3 species of Cud Weed that appear in Lake County or naturalized in Lake County. It seems like this one is probably the Pennsylvania everlasting or wandering cudweed. It is not a native, but there's also a similar cudweed called purple or delicate everlasting, which is a native. So, although this plant, all the cudweeds are considered weeds, this species, the Gamma chata, is a larval host for the American lady butterfly, and it's also a forage plant for gopher tortoises. So although it's not native and it's a weed, you might consider keeping it or keeping some of it. This was an interesting one submitted by Diane. It was a little hard to see the details on this. So we had a lot of different suggestions, and one of the things that's most interesting, what I did was I put the family name of the plants, and very often you'll get a lot of suggestions that are all in the same family. This time we seem to get suggestions that were in all sorts of different families. So looked at all of these, but if you can see the leaves don't really look the same on any of them. And then false buttonweed was suggested. So I looked that up. There are actually 8 species in Florida. 3 of those species are not native, and only 2 to 3 species are found in Lake County. And when I say 2 to 3 species, the Plant Atlas records vouchered plants, which means specimens have been collected, verified, and cataloged. The false buttonweed has been vouchered in, for one of the species, has been vouchered in all the counties around Lake County, but not in Lake County, which makes me suspicious that it is also found in Lake County. Yeah. Anyway, the most likely appears to be scrubby false buttonweed, which is not a native and is in fact an invasive. Supposedly it can form large clumps, although that wasn't shown in the picture. There are also a couple of other false buttonweeds that are native. So this one, I suggest Diane do a little bit more research to ascertain for sure that this is the non-native invasive and not one of the natives before she either gets rid of it or keeps it. Oops.
It does definitely look like it is a buttonweed, so I will research a little bit more, but it's probably an invasive because I'm always finding new invasives.
Yes, as we all are.
Yes.
This is another sort of mystery, a lot of different suggestions of what it was, an aster, a golden aster, cud weed, this viper's bug loss. Although when I looked that up, it is not native and it's not naturalized in Florida, so it seems very unlikely that that's what it would be. It looks like, although it doesn't look exactly like, rabbit tobacco or sweet everlasting, which is a native. According to a couple of websites that I looked at, the first year the plant produces rosettes with woolly hair. So one of the things to check is to see if this has woolly hair. And the second year it produces a tall stem with yellow flowers. So this probably needs a little more research to verify exactly what it is, but it does look like it's getting ready to either shoot up some stalks or flowers. So. This was sent in by Kathy. And after I asked her, I emailed her about thorns, I realized, can you see my pointer? Little hand? I realized that there was a thorn in the picture right there. A couple of people, primarily me, I knew almost immediately that this was a sideroxylon because I have a species of sideroxylon in my yard. The one I have is the sideroxylon 10X, which has like a brown orangey bottom. But this species is differentiated by the leaf shape, which actually varies quite a bit. It can have thorns or not have thorns. It has a baxil leaf hair, which means a baxil means on the bottom of the leaf. And the hair color is different on a lot of the different species. So it was thought that this was the, and I thought primarily because the most widespread, and this species is either called bully, buckthorn, or bumelia. So you may see it as gum bumelia or gum bully. The langu, I can never pronounce it. Languginus is the most widespread of the different species, but I'd also consider Florida bully and buckthorn bully. This is the
Good.
Florida bully. This is the Buckthorn bully. And let me.
Reclinatum, Melanie, the name reclinatum, does that suggest that it has a spreading or prostrate kind of growth habit? Reclinatum?
You know, I'm not sure. It may, but all of
That's how this
these
one
or
is
most
growing.
of these. I'm going to share something else because I use this extensively. You can see this?
Yeah. Mhm.
So very often with plant apps, or if you can, like I did, I knew it looked similar enough to the Sideroxylon I had, but it looked different. So if you can identify a species name, you can pull up. These are all of the Sideroxylons that are found in Florida. And what I first did was I went through, and if you click on them, you see the map of where they're found.
Mhm.
This one is called a silver buckthorn, and when I looked more specifically at it, it said the bottom of the leaf was very silver colored because it has white hairs, and it didn't look like from the picture you sent that there were white hairs.
Right.
So this is the gum bully, which is found in this area. Like I said, this one is the most widespread. You can investigate by going to the photo gallery, which will have pictures. And if you click on that, you can get bigger versions of the pictures and, pictures of the berries, etc. So that's useful. The other thing that is useful, although I don't have I don't know all the terms, is there are links here. Sometimes you can go to iNaturalist, and the benefit of this is they usually have a lot of photos. So if you're, trying to pinpoint some of the characteristics of the plant, you can find a bunch of photos here that people have submitted. So you can, take a look and compare what you have with what these photos are. The other thing that is useful, or that I found useful, and I will admit that I don't know everything there is to know about the terminology, particularly. If you hit the flora, it doesn't give you a picture, but it gives you a description. So one of the things you want to check, the Sideroxylon goes to 15 meters. That's like 45 feet tall.
Yeah.
So once you've identified, or if you think that's what it is, you need to look at where it's coming up, because that may not be a place that you want a thorny 45-foot tall plant.
Right. Or any other place on 10 acres.
Well, they're very good. They're very good for wildlife. Both the berries and birds use them as cover. So they are, good native plants to have, but in certain locations, depending on the size of your yard, et cetera, they may not fit in with your landscaping.
Mhm.
So this says, this is the gum bully. This says stems are armed or not armed. Villous, which means it has thorns. And glabrescent, which I think means it's smooth. It's deciduous. The leaves, again, are villous or sparsely villous to glabrate, which means smooth again. Anyway, the shape, oblong to oblanceolate to spatulate, that's 3 different shapes.
Mhm.
So that can make it confusing to ID a plant if it has different shaped leaves. It may mean that, you know, 2 different plants of the same species their leaves may look very different. One of the reasons I thought that this was the plant that was sent in was probably the gum bully, was this was the one that the description said may not have maybe villous or sparsely hairy. And from the picture, it didn't look like it was very hairy,
Oh,
but Kathy, you can go check the plant and figure it out and compare it to some of these
yeah,
terms.
compare it to the various descriptions, because it appears to be growing kind of flat to the ground,
Okay,
at least at this point. There are several
yeah,
different plants that have come up under magnolia and pine trees. And I haven't seen it in other
interesting.
parts of the property. So it's probably because of birds that have dropped seed there.
Right,
Um,
right, which reinforces the good for birds.
right.
So anyway, you can also wait until it hopefully produces
Berries.
flowers or berries, and that will also help with the description.
Great. Thank you. That's great.
Let me go and share. I'm going to go back to so anyway, this one was partially successful. We've identified what species it is. We just don't know which. I'm sorry, that's not species. We just don't know which of the species it is.
Certainly narrowed down the possibilities quite a bit. So
Yes, yeah, I think we've zeroed in, but not, you know, it's not a home run yet.
Yeah.
This was a plant that has come up various places in my yard. And I probably muddled over this for about 6 months because what first showed up was the rosette, you know, no stalk, just this rosette. I don't know if you can see, but it has very toothed leaves. And that's a characteristic of the lettuces that, sorry. So I was pretty sure it was a lettuce, but until it sprouted a stem and started to flower, I couldn't tell what it was. So after it flowered, I went to the plant atlas, just like I did for the Sideroxylon, and decided it was this called grass leaf lettuce. you can see the leaves going up the stem are pretty long and narrow and grass-like.
Mhm.
I confirmed that it flowers February to September. That's another thing in the atlas. When we looked at that complicated description of the plant, on that same page, there's usually information about when it blooms, when the plant blooms. So that can be pretty useful information to go back and find. Also, other characteristics of this are reddish stems, milky sap. If you break the stem, the sap is milky. So those are another two things you can use to confirm your identification, once you think you know what you have. The other thing is, looking at descriptions of where it's found, and comparing it to the area it's showed up in. So Kathy submitted another one. Which unfortunately is Praxalis, which is not only not native, but it's a category 2 invasive and it's very fast spreading. The interesting thing is visually, it looks very much like the blue mist flower, which is a great native, and the blue mink, which is not a native. So all three of these plants, do look very similar. The definitive way to identify the Praxalis is the strong smell, which people say smells like cat pee. Even though I have cats, I haven't spent a lot of time sniffing the pee, so I can't verify that's what it smells like.
It's
Another one-
interesting. It's pretty because one of my neighbors, somebody in the neighborhood has a whole cluster of this planted around their mailbox, like they planned for it to be there. And I'm looking at that thinking, oh my God, it's going to be all over their yard by next year.
Yes, and probably all over Donna's yard.
Right. This showed up in one of my raised vegetable beds.
Uh-huh.
So I pulled it out. I don't want extra stuff in my beds except what I've planted there. So it had already been removed and destroyed when Melanie let me know what it likely was. So I haven't seen it again since then, but I will keep my eyes open in case it's in other parts of the property.
Yeah. And actually, I'm finding that a lot of plants have smells if you bother to smell them. I mean, salvia, the red salvia smells. So it's kind of an interesting, what should I say, exercise to go around and smell things and see. I'm trying to see if I can get familiar enough with the smells to identify things just by smell.
That's a good idea.
That'd be a fun thing for an in-person meeting.
Yeah.
Blindfold people and well, but it's a good way. So this one, Kathy submitted, and it was identified on plant apps as the red sorrel and sheep sorrel. However, and that's not native, but when I looked at the atlas, it is not naturalized in Lake County. In fact, the only two places it has shown up and been vouchered are way up here in the Panhandle. So that made me think that's probably not what it is. The definitive way to tell is it has a large yellow root and reproduces by rhizomes, so it will have runners. What it more likely is something called heartwing dock or hastate leaf. I can never pronounce these. Which is a native. It's considered a weed. Its roots are vertical. In other words, it has like a tap root. It attracts pollinators, so it is a good plant. You know, if your yard can accommodate this kind of
There we go.
plant.
Okay.
I mean, you know, this is, I'm not sure how fast it spreads, but if you look at some of these other pictures, it can, you know, form a fairly large colony there. And, you know, it's kind of attractive if you're not in an HOA or, you know, in a small piece of property. So anyway, since I didn't go out and dig one up just to, you know, confirm 100%, probably should still check it out. Both the non-native red sorrel and the heartwing dock are considered edible, and so you'll probably find them mentioned on the edible plant websites.
That's a good idea. Okay, well, I will go pull one up because they are still blooming and I can do that and see
Yeah.
what the root looks like.
The heartwing dock I read something about when it goes to seed, it has a little heart-shaped like seed thing, so that would be another characteristic to look at to, you know, confirm it 100% or as close to 100%. I mean, I looked at a lot of pictures and
All right, I just had a,
sometimes
hello, can anybody hear me?
yes.
Oh, I don't want you to hear me. Sorry. I'm sorry. I had to switch to my phone and I'm trying to mute it.
Okay.
It should still be on the screen, Mindy.
The next plant was submitted by Mindy, and this is still a mystery. The most common thing that plant apps and people came back with was Mexican Petunia. But if you look at the leaves, they're a lot longer and narrower than this, with a much pointier end. So that doesn't seem right. Goldenrod was suggested. It does look a little bit like the sempervirens and the gigantica or gigantea, but I didn't dive deep enough to be able to tell which one of those might be it. It looks a little bit like swamp sunflower, which was another suggestion. And there were 3 other suggestions that I didn't look into because I did look at where these plants are found and didn't find anything, you know, that looked like it was seen in this area. Interestingly, when I first saw this picture, I went, oh, I've got the same plant. And I went out and took a picture of the plant that I had, which is a starry rosinweed. Got back in, opened up the picture and said, well, wait a minute. The leaves on this, you know, I'm going, oh yeah, I figured out what this is. got back and looked at the pictures, Mindy's plant, the leaves are alternate, which means they are not across the stem from one another, they're staggered. On the rosin weed, you can see that the leaves are opposite. So it was a nice try, but didn't help. But that's why sometimes you've got to get into all these nitty-gritty details and read those botanical descriptions, which I'll confess, every time I go and look at the botanical descriptions, I end up looking up almost every word in them. Another one submitted by Mindy. So this, what came up in the descriptions was a common, or in the apps was either common myrtle or crepe myrtle, which crepe myrtle is a non-native. It is naturalized in Lake County, which means it's spread and you know, is a volunteer or can be a volunteer. I know crepe myrtle suckers, so it will come up in different places. And it's possible that if Mindy had old land, you know, a crepe myrtle in a landscape before she pulled out stuff and went to natives, that something could have survived. But I'm not convinced it's crepe myrtle. I zoomed in on one of the photos, and this is what the area where the little flower looks like. And although I have not gone around and examined crepe myrtle, my recollection is this is not what the stem and flower look like. So here's another one that we're going to have to keep an eye on, because it looks like it's getting new leaves and it may bloom. And we may have better luck identifying it from a bloom.
Mhm. Yeah, I find my crepe myrtle seedlings aren't that long. You know, they're more shrub-like. So that looks like a wax myrtle or something.
Yeah, I don't think it's a wax myrtle, but
It's in that,
that's one I didn't look at real closely. So
yeah, definitely learned
maybe
it
another
into-
one to add to this. And this is another lettuce. Again, the toothed leaves are sort of a good, good place to start. This, you can't see what color the blooms are, but from the leaf arrangement, which, the other lettuce had very long, narrow, grass-like leaves. You can see that these leaves are different. So it looks like it is probably Canada lettuce or wild lettuce. Again, the young leaves are edible. Several sites said that the older leaves are bitter. Like a lot of the lettuces, it has the milky sap. It should have yellow flowers in June to October, and it is a native. There is another native lettuce, blooms around the same time. It can reach 6 feet, so it's tall like this, but it has bluish flowers. So I think Mindy needs to keep an eye on this, and in sometime between June and October, report back what color flowers it has. So you all probably have your favorite tools. What I've done is listed my favorite tools. When I was first learning native plants and whenever I go on a field trip, I love this guide to Florida wildflowers. I think there's a new version that's been published. Can you see this? But what's great about this is it is organized by flower color. So if you find something out in the field that say has a yellow flower, you can flip through the yellow section. So that makes it very useful. The other one I use quite a bit is this weeds, southern turf grass. There's also a PDF that's pretty good on our website under resources that shows a lot of the weeds you frequently find in this area. Databases, I'm really liking the Plant Atlas. And
that's awesome.
And it seems like the more that I poke around on it, the more things I find. You can pull up, if you go to the browse section and say photos, you can browse by photos if you have, 5 hours to spare and want to look at every photo. I mean, I have gotten very compulsive about identifying plants, and I actually have sat there and scrolled for hours through pictures.
Yeah.
But you have to be slightly demented to do that.
I was down that rabbit hole last weekend. It was like crazy. 3 hours went by and I'm still like on number 4.
Yeah. But, in the scheme of things, you can either watch, watch mindless TV, or you can be scrolling through the plant stuff. I find that every time I go in, I'm happy if I learn one thing. There may be 100 things that I look at and that just go right over my head. But if I can learn one thing, I figure it's worthwhile. There's also a pretty good weed identification database, and I haven't been on it in a while, but I think you can put in characteristics and it will pull up the weeds. And then if you're looking for wildflowers, the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center also has a pretty good database. There are apps, iNaturalist, Picture This, and Plant Snap are the ones that people told me they used for these identifications. They can be good to give you an idea of the plant, but they're not always right, so don't always take what they say at face value. But they're often a good starting point because they will suggest what the plant might be, and then you can follow up to find out, number one, is this a plant that's found in my area? Because sometimes you can eliminate ideas just because it's not something that's likely to be growing in your area. So those can be good. Katrina posted a bunch of these on Facebook. I think she likes the I think she likes the Florida Native Gardening Group, but I also see the native plants of Florida. I haven't looked at these much recently, but way back, I joined these groups because I thought it was a great way to learn about identifying plants. You know, you just look at someone posts a picture and says, you know, I need help IDing this. And then a bunch of people respond with what they think it is. But it's a great way to learn and you know, and also test your knowledge to see, you know, how many of the things that are posted you can actually identify. I haven't used this, but UF-IFAS extension offices, you can take plants in there. There, I put the link for, you can send in photos. And this link is actually pretty good because they tell you what you need to include in the photos you send in. So that's helpful. That's helpful even if you're just taking pictures to post on Facebook. So the only way to do this is keep learning, observe on the field trips and other people's gardens. I mean, I have gone to other people's gardens, and even though I have a, you know, the same plant in my yard, mine may be really young, and I look at the same plant in other people's garden and had no idea when it would look like that when it grew up. Because, you know, and that's partly because all of these plant databases mostly show the flowers. They don't, a lot of them don't show the entire plant. And when they do show the entire plant, there may not be anything in the picture that allows you to scale it. So you don't know if it's, you know, 2 feet high or 10 feet high. I think it's good to learn the Latin names, especially the families and the species. I think it's good to learn the plant characteristics, which is, and the keys, which are all of these shapes, you know, the leaf shape, what the edges look like, the arrangement. I've looked at all these. Unfortunately, I haven't memorized them, which is why I keep looking up all the terms every time I go look at a description.
Do you think there's a good source, Melanie, of those kinds of things that, you know, that you can use, like,
Well,
have handy?
A lot of the flower books have something in the front. I haven't found the, you know, the definitive plant ID thing, but since I'm trying to learn that or learn more about it, I'm looking. So I will let you guys know if I find anything. But the other thing, I think we can bring in somebody who is a botanist and can go through all of these terms. So I think that may be the best thing to do to, you know, learn more about this. Pam Adams gave me a book called Botany in a Day. And I tried very hard to read that book.
No, huh?
You know, I get a few pages in and then my head would be exploding.
Jeez.
I guess the reason I'm asking about that kind of cue card, or, you know, that is on this slide, is because of that. I, you know, distinctly remember not being able to memorize these things when I was in college, and you know, in a botany class, and so I have no recollection whatsoever of what these terms mean.
right.
Really, do you know if Craig Hugel's book, have you read that? Is that, I mean, his last book, I guess, was one that really focused on the basics of botany.
Oh, the nature of plants.
Yes.
I read that twice.
No.
Because it was hard to absorb the first time, and it doesn't teach you about terms.
Okay.
Yeah.
The issue I found is all of the places online I've looked at so far to define these terms and, you know, find nice little cards or little pictures. It's like they're all different.
Oh.
So I'm still looking, and we'll definitely post what I find. I've got to go back through what I pulled up, but something like this, I mean, I've seen cards with, you know, 20 things about about the leaf shapes. And then with the leaf shapes, like you have the what was that one we did? Lanceolate.
Lanceolate, yeah.
But then you put an OB in front of it, oblanceolate, which means it's lanceolate except backwards, with the pointy tip towards the stem and the wider tip, the wider end, you know, further away from the stem. So yeah, it can be really interesting, but understanding the basics, understanding, you know, stuff like that, having if we can find access to, you know, a good reference, whether it's online or in a book, you know, that would be a good thing to have by your side, particularly when you're going through those detailed descriptions. And those are confusing too, because they'll have 5 different terms for what sounds to me like basically the same thing. Well, like I was looking at the Sideroxylon, and it's like, you know, some things say they're hairy, they're bilious. There was another term, a couple of other terms, you know, for basically hairy. So there are also FNPS programs that will teach you a little bit. There are YouTube videos. There are a lot of YouTube videos. But I think for the fall, we will try to set up something with someone who is a botanist and can go through this kind of stuff. It just makes it a little bit easier to interpret what you're finding when you're researching a plant.
It makes it easier to talk about as well.
Yes.
When we have the same terms.
Yeah.
And of course, it does depend, you know, which leaf you pick to look at on the plant, because they're not all identical. And if your plant is growing in shade rather than sun, the leaves are
look bigger,
smaller, you know. So,
or if your plant's young versus old,
right.
You know, it may be very different.
But it's really helpful. I really appreciate not just the attempts at identifying, but sharing the methods of doing that, or possible methods. Because I have another area of interest that includes lots of rabbit holes. I'm really interested in ancestry and genealogy, and rabbit holes are us. And unfortunately, this is the same thing. You can just get caught up and still not have an idea. But having guidance about the specifics to try to judge makes it helpful.
Right.
It's not just sitting there looking through pictures, but instead, okay, so I have this oval shaped leaf. Now I also have a square stem. How do I put those
Right.
two things together to get a little more information about what it is that I'm looking at?
Right, and unfortunately, a lot of the databases don't. My recollection is that Weed database sort of had a place you could put in characteristics, but I've got to go back and look at it.
Mhm.
But yeah, on all of these, either by asking, asking on Facebook, asking a friend, you can email a picture to someone in the group and say, what is this? You can often, not always, but often get a pretty good idea or something pretty close.
Mhm.
And then you can dive into, I love the plant atlas because you can at least see where the plant grows. It does tell you whether it's native or non-native. There are pictures, although they're, often just pictures of the blooms and not so much of the whole plant.
Mhm.
But that's a good way. And then you can start diving into the more detailed descriptions. If the pictures and location doesn't cement something.
Mhm.
And that's the end.
It was very well done.
Well, it was sort of fun to do. I have been doing this a lot for myself. Not always successfully, but always compulsively.
I hear that, definitely. Oh,
So
great.
does anyone have any other questions? So again, thank all of you who submitted pictures and all of you who helped in the identification. All right, thanks very much, and go out and enjoy your Saturday.
Beautiful.
And please do a rain dance.
Oh, yeah. We are dry, definitely.
Yes.
Ooh,
Yeah, maybe tonight. That would really be good.
yeah.
Thank you very
Okay.
much, everybody. It was good to see everybody face to face, as many of us who are willing to be
Yeah.
face to face. Thanks.
Thank you,
Yes.
Melanie.
Thanks. See you
Okay,
guys all
you're
later.
welcome. Thanks.